And welcome. It's another live. Really excited to do this one because I'm talking to the lovely Heather from Mrs. Ticklytoes Reflexology, and I'm going to be picking her brains and finding out. And then we'll get started. So hopefully she'll be coming on in just a second. Hello. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
I'm really low down. I've just noticed you can only just see me above the camera, can't you? So I'm going to try and prop myself up a bit. Having some technical
feeling behind me.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh,
so, I want to talk all things reflexology and find out lots more about what you do, the work that you do, and how important it is, the kind of people that you work with. But I thought to start with, it would be really great if you could just give us a little bit of background of your story, and you know how you got into it and where it all came from. Oh, I think we've lost Heather. Just waiting for it to reconnect. Oh, the joys of internet. Okay, let's see if we can add her again. Let's try again. We will get there. There with us. I just wait for it to reconnect. If anyone's got any questions as we go through, please just shout out. Hello, you're back.
We love technology.
So the question was, do you want to just give us a little bit of background of how you got into this, and what your story is?
Yeah. So I've been a reflexologist now for coming up for 8 years. So I previously, before that, I've always worked with children and young people. So in different areas, but I used to work for various charities like Bernardo's, Sova, the CGL, done some work, tended work for the Children's Society. Yeah, so I go back a long way. I've worked in leaving care, I've worked in various different roles, and I'm a psychologist by background, so my degree was in psychology, and when I was working with looked after children in particular, whether it be in my Raising Aspirations role, whether it be in education, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be leaving care, one of the things that I was always finding was that a lot of the children that I supported were held back because of things like trauma. So what I did was I kind of found reflexology and psychology, trauma management by accident. So I went and had a reflexology treatment somewhere at a spa weekend, and they were able to tell me something about me that nobody could have known, and that I hadn't disclosed on the form. So and I was like, how do you know that? That's amazing. So I'd already been interested in holistic therapies, aromatherapy, since I was, I don't know, probably about 16. So yeah, I kind of just decided that surely there's got to be a way to bring these two things that I love together, you know, working with looked after children and working with reflexology. So then my therapeutic programs were kind of born, and that's where it started. That's also how I know you, isn't it, Julie, from our work
Yeah.
at
Yeah, I was volunteering.
I was your manager.
You were. I know. You were guiding and supporting me as I was trying to, support a young person in care. But
you didn't need any guidance and support. You should have been running the show.
I completely see where you're coming from, though, with just trying to get some more support for children, especially. I mean, I think everyone knows that there is a mental health crisis, especially amongst children at the moment, and anything that we can do or learn more about that can actually support them is amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was just going to say that a lot of the traditional things that we use in schools or that we use with children are not actually, they're not actually scratching deep enough for our children. And I think one of the things that I find really difficult is if you seek help from any kind of professional. So if you were to go to your GP, for example, they would always recommend counselling as a first port of call. Now, counselling is wonderful. You know, if you've never had counselling over your life, I would definitely refer you. Everybody needs a bit of counselling about something. Yeah. So it just makes things easier to understand and easier to work through. But for a child accessing counselling, it can be, if you don't get the right counsellor with the right skills, it can be not that fruitful. Other options are things like medicating. So I have a lot of clients with autism and ADHD, and whilst medication has its place for some children, again, like counselling, it's not a one size fits all. So I think we just have to be really open to try new things. And I mean, over the last sort of few years, certainly in the last 10 years since I've been practicing, there's been more emphasis on things like play therapy and dance therapy and movement, and looking at different things that children can access to help them deal with their mental health. But there hasn't been a move towards holistic therapies, and that they have a long standing in our treatment of adults for things, but they don't seem to be publicised as much for the treatment of children.
Yeah. I think as well that there is help and support out there, like you talk about counselling and like services like CAMS and things like that. The problem is accessing it, and I think there's so many parents out there who want to find the help for their children, who are trying to find the help for their children, but there's such a delay in actually receiving the help for the children. So anything that we can implement like this, which can help in the meantime or as an alternative, is just such a win, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the bulk of my clients that I work with are either at the start of their journey towards diagnosis or are on a waiting list. So it's kind of like they come and they're in crisis, and you know, I know this from working with looked after children, you know, that crisis is an immediate crisis. If your child is suffering with mental health problems, or perhaps they're self-harming, or they're being bullied, or, you know, all these things, it's immediate. Because actually our children, they feel, and they're picking things up, it's stunting their development, because obviously your emotional development, it really relies on having good support around you. And I think life now is very different. I mean, me and one of my other friends, Emma from Wellbeing Wise, hope you're watching, we used to go to school together, and we were always joking that we wouldn't do our teenage years again, because it's all on mobile phones. You know, it's there for everybody to see, isn't it? So, you know, all the scraps and scrapes we got into when we were just learning about ourselves and how to, you know, kind of navigate through life is all over social media now. And, you know, everybody makes bad choices. It's part of growing up. It's part of the importance of growing up. But, you know, I think sometimes we've just got too much in the public domain.
Yeah. How, in sort of specific ways, can reflexology help children?
So I mean, to be fair, it depends what the sort of consequences. So I get a lot of parents with children with ADHD whose brains just run and run and run. And that's really hard, because I know as an adult your brain just runs and runs and runs. So it's looking at how we calm those symptoms, because like everything, there is no cure for a lot of the things that people would seek out reflexology for. We do not cure, we also don't diagnose as reflexologists. So one of the things that's really important is looking at the symptoms. So I'll do like a full consultation with parents when they come through, and I'll ask them what's going on, and quite often sleep is high on the agenda. one other thing that's quite interesting about children with spectrum or neurodiverse diagnoses is that they have problems with toileting, quite often constipation. So what I'll do is I'll say to parents, well, you know, if you think about it, when you're constipated, you feel a bit grumpy, don't you? So, you know, maybe they're just feeling a bit grumpy, but it's exasperated because they're managing other symptoms as well. So sleep's a big one. Tummy troubles, bowel troubles is a big one. Sometimes young people just don't know how to relax. So I treat some children who the brain area is in the toe, so it's in the big toe of the foot or in the thumb. So quite often when I am treating a child whose brain runs, somebody with ADHD or another diagnosis where they can't relax, I can't get anywhere near the feet because I try and get near their toes and they're pulling their toes away because they're like, oh, no, you want to calm down, don't make me calm down. So it's like that resistance. So you have to kind of build up that tolerance, and you have to understand the child as well. So like a lot of my clients are long-standing clients. Now my aim is always to kind of teach the parent how to support their child, or teach the child how to support themselves, so they don't have to come and see me long term. Because you know it's a big financial outlay, and basically we want children to have control over their own situations. This is kind of, again, from my background in trauma work and working with a looked after, they don't have a lot of say over what goes on in their own lives. So it's about teaching them their own techniques to take away with them, and things that they can do at home to support themselves if they're not able to get to sleep and their brain's running, different techniques that they can use. So it's very, very individual, and the types of things that you can do are very individual. So that's why it's really important to get a really good perspective on where things are with the parent, because we want to see results, and we want to see them not quickly as such. We want to see good results, and we want to see them as soon as we can. So and it
sounds like it's a way of empowering children to actually be able to have, like you say, some control over what's going on for them, to have some way of managing how they're feeling, and also to self-soothe, because I think it's really hard for children to learn. I mean, it's hard for us as adults, but especially as children, to learn to self-soothe. This is just one way that it can do that. And I mean, we've already touched on social media, and I was listening to someone talking about mobile phones and the effect that is having on like teenagers' brains. And I think it's so difficult, isn't it, because we're surrounded by activity constantly now. Like, we just don't have a chance to just sit, get bored, just have that downtime.
And I mean, it's like when I was younger, I used to play out in the garden like all the time, and you know, like we were just playing at nothing, you know, making wood pies and sliding them down the slide and playing at restaurants and stuff. But it was that freedom of being outside, nothing expected of me. I'd done my homework, you know, and I think a lot of the time children are looking to be occupied, and this thing that exists in their hands. I mean, you know, God, look at us now. We're having this wonderful conversation on Instagram, which we wouldn't be having if these platforms didn't exist, and I couldn't have a lot of my business meetings, and I couldn't advise schools and things, you know, because they were long distance away, if I didn't have technology. But I think what we forget is the impact that technology has. And actually, when our children will say, I'm bored, you know, actually they're not bored. They just have run out of ideas of things to do to keep themselves occupied. And the problem with that is that then they're not doing anything that chills them out, because tablets and mobile phones, they're stimulating. It's like children who watch the tablets before they go to bed and then they don't sleep well. It's blue light, it's stimulating, and you know, that's why one of the things that I do when I do consultations with parents is I will talk about things like tablet time and how do you manage kind of sleep, bedtimes, behaviour, that sort of thing. What's the routine like? What's eating like? Those kind of things. It's all completely related.
As well, isn't it? Not just for our children. I have to think about what I'm doing and my habits as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's sometimes when I can't sleep or whatever, my temptation is to pick up my phone that's at the side of my bed. But I'm like, no, because you'll be awake for another hour and a half, and all you're doing is doom scrolling and watching real videos. And you know, some of the things that you get from social media and that interaction with your phone, you know, they feed kind of enthusiasm for things. There's knowledge in there. But certainly for young people, it is your best and your worst friend right there in your hand. And you know, it's somebody bullying you constantly in your hand. It's your link to the outside world from your bedroom in your hand. And it's really, I mean, I worry. How can I stop my girls from having phones?
I know, I think we're all the same. So do you predominantly work with children? Do you work with adults as well?
Yes, I do. Yeah. And you know, it's funny because the crossover is just, you know, amazing. When I first started working as a reflexologist, I'd made my mind up that I want to work with children. That's what I want to do. But actually, in order to work with children, I needed to work with adults. And I mean, like, the thing I love about reflexology is you never know it all. You could do qualification after qualification. I could do a million CPD courses. I could touch thousands of pairs of feet, and you learn all the time. And actually, a lot of my learning and my progression comes from adult clients rather than from children. So I'm grateful, you know, to work with both. And when I first started working in reflexology, so when I first set up my practice, I mean, I can't believe I've nearly been going 8 years. I'm not really sure how I survived a pandemic and all of that, but I'm still here. I'm still chirping on. But yeah, so like when I first started, I had, just purely by accident, I had loads of clients come in with fertility issues. So I bobbed myself down to London and did a fertility workshop with a lady called Louise Keat. If anybody reflexology world, Louise Keat's amazing. Her training's brilliant. So I went down and I did some training with Louise around fertility reflexology. And I came home and I used some of the principles because not all of them were relevant for my clientele. So I used some of the principles, and oh my goodness, I just did absolutely amazing. All these people were getting pregnant. I mean, I don't know if it was in the water or what, but it was specifically working. So kind of I made sure, because obviously I take notes after sessions, but I kind of looked back at my notes and I realised that I was doing the same thing with each of the clients, and I thought, well, this wasn't in my training. This is just something that I've kind of put together myself, like an add-on. So I put it in some training, and then I started delivering fertility training, and it's kind of gone from there. So I've got quite a few courses that I do. So I teach within the NHS now as well. And I go into Derby Uni and do some guest lecturing as well on reflexology and its benefits. Yeah, my NHS course, I'm very excited. I'm going to Northampton next week to deliver that. So that's fun. So I can have a nice long drive there with music on, Julie, no school run.
Simple pleasures.
It is. I'm going to have a hot coffee. I've planned it all out, honestly. Yeah, well, little wins.
So as well as like you've mentioned fertility, what's some of the sort of main things that people come to you for help with?
So adult clients, really, it can be pretty much anything. So I get people who come in who are awaiting knee replacements, hip replacements, and are struggling with the mobility. I've got people with bad backs. I have some people that come to see me who are dealing with grief. I work with cancer patients, both during treatment and post-treatment. And I mean, yeah, it's kind of a very, very long table of people that I work with, because reflexology is really powerful, and there's not anything that you can't sort of treat with. So it's good for everything. The only thing that you have to obviously stay away from is if people are taking any new drugs and strong drugs, and that's why if I'm treating somebody who's having chemotherapy or radiotherapy, I usually wait until 2 or 3 sessions they've had, so they can see how they're reacting and responding to the drugs. And also you can't treat people who've got a fever. So if you've got a cold and you come in for reflexology, I can't treat you, and you would feel horrendous as well, because it just speeds everything up. So the best thing to do is wait till your fever's gone and come and see me with a snotty nose.
You want the snotty people to come.
An invitation. I've got 2 children with permanent snotty noses, so
I just wanted to ask you one more thing, because
okay.
I think this is something that we're both really interested in, and I want to find out more, and I'd love sort of hearing more about this. But it's all this research that's happening recently to do with how what's going off internally for us is actually showing externally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a really big piece of research going on in the US at the moment, a chap called Kevin Kunz and his wife. So what they've been doing, and it's so exciting, and anybody who does any training with me, or anybody who does any of the live sessions with me, I have a like a tag for you to donate at the end of that training, because it's non-funded, so they're having to fundraise. So I asked if I could promote that link for them, and he said yes. So anybody who knows anything about reflexology in the reflexology world, what's going on is around putting patients in an MRI scanner and giving them reflexology while they're being scanned, and looking at the impact that it's having on the brain and the body. Wow. So it's really key, because we've known as reflexologists, you know, for thousands of years that reflexology works and it supports people. But it's kind of that now we've got this little golden paper, once it's published, that will say we can be there. NHS, you need to be doing this more often, because if you look at reflexology in NHS services at the moment, if you're having a baby, you might be offered reflexology when you're in labour. If you are having cancer treatment or in palliative care, you may be offered reflexology for pain relief, pain management, relaxation, sleep, those kind of things. But what nobody's talking about, and this is why I wrote the Reflexology for Rehabilitation course, is how can we use reflexology to rehabilitate when we've got patients that can't traditionally rehabilitate? So if you've got somebody who has had a stroke, and this was where the course was born from, because my dad had a really bad stroke in 2019, and he wasn't able to traditionally rehabilitate. So it was kind of like, well, how can I remind him that although he's got no sensation in his left arm and his left leg, and he's not able to use them and walk, how do we remind him and remind his brain and his body that they're there still? So it was about stimulating those pathways and making sure that the nervous system was sending signals back to the brain to say, hey, my leg's still here, it's not fell off, you know. And you know, it was kind of a little bit like looking at how we marry those things together and get the most out of patient rehabilitation. Because, you know, if you've ever been into hospital, you see those signs around that, you know, a week in bed's like a year for rehabilitation. You know, we know it affects patients, but basically it's just looking at where we can challenge. So once we've got this bit of research, it means that we can stand ourselves up with other therapies, you know, like with occupational therapy, with physiotherapy, and integrate it into the work that we do with patients, and ultimately with children, because they need the most support with rehabilitation. So yeah, hopefully I can be part of that movement.
It reminds me of meditation as well, because I saw something recently. It was a similar thing where they had people in MRIs and did brain scans on them, and you could see actually how meditation is affecting the brain. And I think sometimes some of us live because we kind of want some evidence. We want to actually see how it's working. So to be able to have that with the MRIs, it kind of makes us think, oh, actually, this is a thing. This does actually work. It does make a difference. And physically, it makes it tangible. A difference. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes it tangible. And I think, I mean, I've just seen a question pop up, how is reflexology different from physiotherapy? Well, physio is working with the actual area. So if you're having physio, say for your knee joint, perhaps you've had a knee replacement or a hip replacement, they would be working directly with that joint. But actually what reflexology does is it uses those reflex points on the feet, and it works with those areas around and that support that area. So for example, if one of the reasons you're struggling to rehabilitate when you're doing your physio rehab is because you've actually got a lot of swelling and a lot of fluid around there, then it means that reflexology can help with lymphatic drainage and help to move that fluid on. So it is different. And I get asked this question loads, Julie, like, is it woo-woo?
Yeah.
And you know what? The answer, funnily enough, is it's not woo-woo, but sometimes I think it's woo-woo and I know what I'm doing, because it's absolutely amazing sometimes
Yeah.
how you can do something and it makes such a difference to somebody. And I know that when I'm practicing and when I'm working with clients, I'll sometimes go, God, you forget that's connected, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so effective that it just takes you by surprise still now.
Yeah, and I love it. I love it. And you're always learning, and you know, you're always striving to learn. So if I get somebody contact me with something, I mean, I had it a few years ago, a child with POTS, which is like a pulmonary disorder. It was diagnosed a lot in children after COVID. I'd never heard of it before. So what I did was I did some research. I got in touch with some other reflexologists throughout the country who had treated children with POTS, and asked them some questions about how they'd found it. And, you know, it was a really good way of being able to research this topic and support this child. Because otherwise they would have had to travel outside Derbyshire to go and get this support. So yeah, it's nice, and I like to learn and I love to teach. So for me, it's really nice because I don't proclaim to know it all. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I'll say I don't know what I'm doing.
It's brilliant because you're bringing together so many things that you're passionate about, and you can see that. And
Yeah,
I'm so excited to like hear more about what you're doing and where you're going with this.
yeah.
Um, thank you for like just telling me all of that, for sharing all that information. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Really enjoyed
Always nice to chat
chatting
with
with
you,
you.
Julie.
And I can't wait to get booked in for a session with you. I started some new drugs last week, so I'm hoping
Yeah.
in a couple of
Waiting for
weeks
them
when I
to
know
start.
everything's settled, finish the chemo, I'm going to come and
You'll
have a
be in that
good
chair. You will be
session.
in
I
that
will
chair,
be.
Julie.
You won't be able to get rid of me, Heather.
No, that's all right. That's fine. You stay as long as you like.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so lovely. And I'll
Oh,
catch you
thank you.
soon.
Oh, take care.
Take care.
I'll see you later.
Bye.
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 Bye.